When you're looking for a job, you're looking for a job. You don't make choices. Some people do. Some very principled people make a decision not to work in the arms industry. But you go to a company because you're going to get paid and you're going to feed your wife and kids and whatever.
And then when you get settled in, you get more confident. You're then entitled to say, well, why am I doing this?
This is a story about when these workers' livelihoods were threatened, and they came up with an alternative plan.
They expressed their great anxiety about the future of their company and the prospects for employment. And I said to them, well, look, why don't you go away and do a corporate strategy for your own company based on your own knowledge of the company, of the equipment, of the skills, of the market available? And they did. And it's one of the most remarkable exercises that's ever occurred in British industrial history.
We took the view that it was no good just waiting until the problems were on us and then whining to the government or to the TUC or whoever that we want the right to work. We thought that we have a very highly skilled, very competent workforce, and we have the intelligence amongst ourselves to devise or endeavour to solve the problems for ourselves.
Because it's a very small step to go from power generators on aircraft to wind turbines.
A plan that's even more pertinent today.
And you'll see things in there, cheap, efficient heating systems, propulsion units, such as hybrid engines for motor vehicles. That uses the best characteristics of both the petrol and electric engines. Power generating equipment, Lukas Aerospace, core business almost, was power generation gas turbines to provide the electricity for aircraft. So in the plan, there is a proposal for wind turbines. An example of a product that came up from, actually wasn't one of our members, it wasn't a union member in our office. He said, I'm against more or less everything that you do, Phil. He said, but I really support this. He'd worked on heat pumps and that kind of technology for a long time, and we actually developed a prototype heat pump powered by natural gas.
What the corporate plan was saying, you make socially useful products, and when we look at cutting back on defence, what could you do with the skills that you've got, with the capital that you've got? What could you make if you weren't making that?
If that had been spent on mass transit, heating systems, solar power, wind generation, all of those sectors would provide more jobs.
And it all happened 40 years ago. 150 alternative products developed from the shop floor for a more sustainable world.
These ideas are around, it's just a question of bringing them together, of developing them into something that will really work. We had 4 or 5 of the more technically minded people actually sorting out, will this work, will it not? People who actually design parts for aircraft that keeps aircraft in the air. So they weren't airy-fairy, I mean they knew what they were doing. But it had tapped into the workforce, and if you've got people who had ideas, they wanted their ideas to be known as well.
And that was when the whole notion of the political climate we were in was writ larger, because the government were the main customer of Lukas Aerospace, but somehow there was a political definition of profit at work, that it was profitable to make arms, paid for by taxpayers' money, but not profitable to make life-saving equipment, paid for by taxpayers' money. So there's a pure political definition of profit taking place there. I think what I saw, along with my colleagues around me, was the world around us was not right. The technology was not being used in the interests of ordinary working people. The control of technology and where the money is put into scientific research. It's okay to pour tens of millions of pounds, if not billions, into researching and developing and improving, say, a fighter's manoeuvrability by 2%. That's okay, and that always used to be done on a cost-plus contract, so the company could charge what they want. But, it's not profitable to keep an extra 3,000 people a year alive for want of kidney machines. 3,000 people were dying each year for want of a kidney dialysis machine.
And Lucas already made this particular product, but they were reducing the numbers they were making, and there was, at the same time, there was more of a need. You're a worker as well as being part of the community. I mean, that's the two things. You can't just see yourself as a worker. Okay, you're going there to get yourself a living, but also you take into account you live in a wider society. Your neighbour's probably got a problem with the kidneys or whatever, so there's a connection there, and you see the various things that are going on. You see about the environment, about the fact that we were running out of oil, and it was we had to look at other forms of motivating cars. So you just haven't got this sort of set mind of a worker, but you also, once you get to a position where you're saying, well, we haven't got enough. They say we haven't got enough work doing this. They wasn't getting the aerospace work. Then I think automatically, if you're going to talk about other products, you're going to talk about something useful, because you're a person, you're a human, you're affected by it all.
And whilst we were looking at the corporate plan in terms of preserving our jobs, we were looking at society in a broader sense. We wanted to broaden it out. And in many respects, it broadened itself out. It took us on paths. Energy. The main areas in energy was conservation of energy and the storage of energy, particularly in housing. To develop designs in building houses that were energy efficient, run in conjunction with the ideas that we had about developing systems with local authorities to support people with design input in building their own houses and building in these energy conservation systems. Then ordinary people who were unemployed could then be put to work building their own house, and it would be designed in such a way as to be energy efficient, both in terms of conserving the energy in the house and maintaining and collecting energy that would be for their use and their community's use.
Light them all up. Come on, fire! Hey, Roger. Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
We're in a period where oil prices had quadrupled. It was just after yet another conflict in the Middle East. So, again, the political backdrop to the construction of the plan meant you couldn't actually do anything without thinking of the energy consequences of it. So, the conservation of energy in the production process, and then that whole notion of built-in obsolescence, which was a wastage of energy, and Lucas Motors were a past master of that, because they were designing motorcar components for obsolescence. Design meeting at Great King Street that Mike used to talk about, where the secondary market for spare windscreen wiper motors was flagging because they were lasting too long. So they reduced the bearing area by 30%, so the windscreen wiper motors would wear out quicker, so they'd sell more on the spares market. and the cost to the planet in raw materials of that built-in obsolescence type manufacture, which is still with us, isn't it? That things don't last, so they end up on the tip. So you have to mine more scarce materials, you have to fight and wage war over who controls the raw materials. And there was the proposal to try and stop design for built-in obsolescence, and therefore things should be made in a fashion where they could be repaired, and the skills then for repairing cars, washing machines, dishwashers could be taught to perhaps younger people as a means of giving them a skill set, the awareness of energy and repair rather than design for built-in obsolescence.
Young people searching for spare parts on this waste-dumping Ghana wasn't exactly what Phil had in mind. All this no doubt a profitable way to meet EU recycling targets. One of the largest poisonous waste dumps for throwaway Western goods. Small change to what can be made on the grander world dumping grounds.
In the division where I worked, the engine management division, Lucas, they wanted just to concentrate on aerospace products and didn't really get involved in industrial applications of gas turbines. And some of these gas turbines, I think it was a GG220, was particularly suitable for combined heat and power systems within communities, so that you could have the system, you know, again under the head of energy conservation, using a gas turbine generator. It would provide heat and power for a local community.
Is it a town, is it a city, or is it just an housing estate? You determine the community, then you look at the size of the power plant that you need to do that. The gas turbine, develop the gas turbines, they will give you power, that's your electricity, they will give you your heating, and it will be all in one system. And all you'd need is the switching gear in each house to control the input into the house from that source. And then you can feed it off to the grid, what's left of it. But it's a community thing. The community have to be involved, they have to discuss it, they have to know what's going on, know how to work it and know how to control it. I mean, you've got to remember that all the systems of sewerage, etc., all goes back to local authorities. I mean, it's not big business that starts these, it's local authorities. Like towns like Birmingham in the 19th century. So we're going back to that in a sense. It's, dare I use the phrase, back to the future sort of thing, that people controlling their own environments, controlling their own energy inputs and outputs, and paying for it, which they do, whether it's big business running it or they're running it for their own use. But the profits, if there are any, are for the community. They're not for whoever, some French-owned outfit that owns the power supply system. It's democratising power supply, if you want.
I mean, I don't think it's just a question of deprivatising the companies. I think they've got to go one step further than that, not just back to the old electricity boards, but to do something back in the communities where it all started from in the first place.
I mean, if you think about the involvement of a community, setting up those systems which diminishes the influence of the multinational power companies, and it makes them independent of them. So they all have to be involved in the decisions, they all have to be involved in how the system works, they're creating jobs in their own particular economy, and as a consequence of that, this is only one example of how civil society is being used for its own ends, and in the end of the day, I suppose, for its own profit in that sense, if you want to use that term. So it's not just the power supply itself, it's the effect it has on society. I mean, you're taking on the big builders and all the rest of it. I mean, you come up with an idea where 1 million unemployed people can start building houses which are energy efficient and save on the costs. I mean, the building industry is not going to look on that with great, they're not going to have great enthusiasm for it. You'd need government support, finance, local authority support, finance, but the big builders get that anyway. They get government support, they get local authority support, and the housing prices go through the roof, and working people can't afford them. We were saying protect society and develop society in a fair and equitable way. I mean, the system tries to say that that's you, that's them, nothing to do with one another, but we are a society, and if we're going to look at work, and we're going to look at energy, and we're going to look at efficiency, then we have to look at society as a whole. And that's what we're about. That's what Lukas Aerospace was about. Not Lukas Aerospace, but Lukas Aerospace Joint Shop Stewards were about.
After we'd presented it to Lukas Aerospace directors, they refused to meet us ever again, rejecting the whole thing lock, stock and barrel, including hybrid power pack technology for cars and including wind turbines. The term that management used to discredit that particular proposal for wind turbines was it's in the realm of the brown bread and sandals brigade, and we're aerospace.
In the electronics department, every time we met the management, they made it clear that they weren't interested in any alternatives. They were just upgrading the electronics on the aircraft side, and they saw that as the future, and they didn't want to know about anything else.
After the management rejected the corporate plan, the combine felt it was necessary to demonstrate that 2 or 3 other products that we could afford to build from our meagre combine and supporter resources could actually be translated into products, socially useful products, that would have technical feasibility. So with the assistance of the North East London Polytechnic, funding was obtained from, I think it was Rowntree's, which helped to develop a hybrid power pack for a Hillman Imp motor car. And so they basically transplanted an electric drive system onto a Hillman Imp and a control system to demonstrate the viability of a hybrid drive.
Then I heard that Cadbury Trust could make £60,000 available if we could set up a centre in the Midlands area. I had that discussion with the University of Warwick. They went to the Senate to discuss the idea of us having a unit there. There's a business school there, but they got very clear links with Lucas, and obviously they were frightened off. £60,000 worth of money was, you know, it had funded something for 3 years in those days. It was a good thing. There were people there who wanted to respond to those sorts of initiatives and welcomed it. But the bureaucracy or the management were very hesitant. It was interesting to see what you were dealing with and how they resisted it. And in the end we got this agreement with the Polytechnic in Coventry, and that set up the Unit for Development of Alternative Products.
And quite early on in the project, there was an electric car that was running around, well, an electric vehicle, a small truck actually, that was running around in Coventry, you know, in the early 70s.
And then the Open University, along with ourselves, had a chat, and we got a project going, and we actually developed a prototype gas-powered heat pump powered by natural gas. Hitherto they've been powered by electricity, which wasn't the most thermal efficient way of doing it, and they actually built a gas-powered heat pump. And Sheffield City Council became very interested in gas-powered heat pumps, and that interaction partly led to the inclusion of the concept of social use production in the Labour group's manifesto.
The latest government report suggests that this is one of the major means of conserving energy. The company is still saying that that is not a viable product, but we have intercepted one of the company's own market surveys, which shows that the market for these in the domestic sector by 1985 will be 255 million, so nobody can seriously suggest that that's not viable.
Can a multinational solve the problem of where we're going with the environment? They don't even ask the question. They don't say, where's our products and our systems taking the environment? It's just, will this make us a profit? And if it will make a profit, then it's made. If we can't get the toxic emissions down, let's tell lies about it. And I don't think Volkswagen are on their own there. I mean, this is part of the pressure that comes on to a management. It happens in most industries. But if you look at what's happening in the third world, I mean, it's really horrendous. And the only way it's going to happen is by new ways of approaching society and the way involving society in the way things happen. As we've said in in the products that we've mentioned.
Here was a group of shop stewards really advancing the argument for sustainability in the 70s and management dismissing it, and the cost to the planet shows the lack of responsibility the management displayed.
I think by its very nature, they couldn't solve the problem, even if they wanted to, even if they decided, tomorrow I want to make the world a better place, because they would find that they would lose their competitive edge against other companies and other countries, and therefore they are trapped almost in having to do what their shareholders, if you like, are demanding of them, because they are as vulnerable as anybody else in the capitalist system. So it wasn't about individuals, it was about the system which operates in that particular way. Isn't a brave new world now?
If we don't move now, and move very, very quickly, both large and small companies alike, I think we run a major risk of losing competitiveness.
We still have time to stay in this race if we run very hard now.
It was a philosophical view of the world, the mentality of there's only one way. And all we were doing at Lukas Aerospace was saying there are alternatives to what you're being told. All you've got to do is open your eyes and look at them. That can't be legislated for hook, line and sinker. Legislation can only be put in place that supports society, where at the moment legislation supports big business, supports the city, supports banks. The fact is they spend billions and billions and billions, does state governments, which they pour into private companies. That's okay, right? But if you want to put a few 100,000 or a few million into social use of product, no, that's the market. I think we were very challenging to the system, workers telling them what they should be making. And if you think you can do that with the entrenched power structures you're up against, we are not naive. What we wanted to do was say, well, we'll go past management right down to shop floor and then it'll come up. Obviously, you're turning the world on its head. It's absolutely turning the world on its head.